Picture this. Someone you know just hit $20,000 saved. Took them 3 years, and within 6 months, they're back to $3,000 wondering what the hell happened. Or maybe that person is you. Here's what's insane. The hard part wasn't saving the $20,000. That's just discipline and time. The hard part is the 48 hours after you hit that number, when your brain starts whispering that you deserve something nice, that you've earned an upgrade, that this is finally your moment to stop living like a broke college student. And that whisper is what separates people who retire with $2 million from people who work until they're 70. And today we're talking about the most dangerous moment in your financial life. The moment right after you've saved something meaningful. Because nobody tells you this, but there are only two things that happen when you hit $20,000 saved. Either you turn it into $350,000 over the next 30 years, or you incinerate it trying to look successful. And the difference comes down to what you do in the next 2 weeks. Here's what nobody tells you about this moment. Your brain wants certainty. The market gives you volatility. Your brain wants immediate gratification. Wealth building requires decades of patience. This is why most people fail at this stage, not because they're not smart enough, but because they're fighting their own psychology. So let's talk about what actually works, starting with the most important question. Do you have high interest debt? I'm talking about credit cards, personal loans, anything charging you more than 6 or 7%. If you have $10,000 sitting on a credit card at 22% interest, you're not investing that money. You're paying off the debt first. Let me show you why. If you have $10,000 on a credit card at 22% and you only make the minimum payments, it will take you over 25 years to pay it off, and you will pay roughly $14,000 in interest alone. That's right, you pay the bank more in interest than you originally borrowed. Meanwhile, if you invested that $10,000 in the stock market earning a hopeful 10%, you're fighting a losing battle. You are paying a guaranteed 22% to earn a potential 10%. Mathematically, you are volunteering to lose money every single day. You keep that debt alive. The rule, anything above 6 to 7% interest gets paid off before you invest. Credit cards at 22%, gone. Personal loans at 15%, obliterated. Federal student loans at 6.4%, that's borderline. But I'd lean toward paying it off because guaranteed returns always beat potential returns. And that interest compounds against you every single month. It's like negative compound interest working in reverse, making you poor while you sleep. I know someone who had $18,000 saved and $12,000 in credit card debt at 21% interest. He convinced himself that investing was more important because building wealth early is everything. So he put $10,000 into index funds and kept making minimum payments on the cards. 3 years later, the market had gone up 30%. His $10,000 was now worth $13,000. Sounds great, right? Except he'd paid $8,000 in credit card interest during those 3 years. His $3,000 gain cost him $8,000 to achieve. He was $5,000 poorer than if he'd just paid off the debt first. And when I explained this to him, he looked like I just told him Santa wasn't real, because nobody had ever made him do the actual math. So you've eliminated the high interest debt. You're not bleeding money anymore. Now you might be thinking you should invest everything else immediately. Wrong. Because there's a step most people skip that ends up destroying them later, the emergency fund. If you're single, renting with a stable job and no dependents, you need 3 months of essential expenses. If you've got a mortgage, kids, or freelance income, you need 6 months minimum. For most people, that's $7,500 to $24,000. This is the part where people get nervous because it feels like you're not doing anything exciting with most of the money, but an emergency fund isn't an investment, it's insurance, and it keeps you from going into debt when your transmission dies or you lose your job. Let me tell you what happens when you don't have an emergency fund. Your car needs $1,200 in repairs. You don't have $1,200 sitting around because it's all invested. So you have 3 choices: sell investments and eat the taxes and potential losses, put it on a credit card at 22% interest, or just not fix the car and hope it doesn't get worse. All 3 options are terrible, and now you're making financial decisions based on panic instead of planning. This is why the emergency fund comes first, even though it feels like dead money earning nothing. It's not earning nothing. It's earning peace of mind, which is the only thing that lets you stay invested when the market drops 30%. Where should this emergency fund live? A high-yield savings account earning 3.5% to 4.5%, not a regular checking account earning nothing, not the stock market. Just a boring FDIC-insured high-yield savings account. PieBank is paying 4.6%. Marcus and Ally are around 3.3% to 3.65%. Okay, so you've paid off high-interest debt, you've got your emergency fund set, and now you've got between $5,000 and $10,000 left. This is where actual wealth building starts. Priority number 1. Max out a Roth IRA for 2026. The contribution limit is likely $7,000 to $7,500. Check the IRS website for the exact inflation adjustment. If you're under 50 and make less than the income limit, you can contribute the full amount. This is the single best financial move you can make. Here's why. Everything that grows inside a Roth IRA is tax-free forever, not tax-deferred, tax-free. If you're 25 and you put $7,500 into a Roth IRA today and it grows at 10% per year by age 65, that $7,500 will be worth about $339,000. You won't pay taxes on that $331,500 in gains. If that money was in a taxable account, you'd owe $50,000 to $65,000 in capital gains taxes. You're locking in today's tax rate on the seed and getting tomorrow's tree completely tax-free. Okay, you've opened the Roth IRA and funded it with $7,500. You're staring at your account balance. Now what? This is where people panic and start researching stocks or asking Reddit which companies are about to explode. Stop. Close Reddit. You're about to do something so boring and so effective that it feels like cheating. Inside that Roth IRA, Buy Abroad Index Fund, VOO tracks the S&P 500 with a 0.03% expense ratio. VTI tracks the entire US stock market, also 0.03%. The S&P 500 has returned about 10% per year on average for the past century. Over any 20-year period, it's never produced a negative real return. And before you ask, no, you don't need to research individual stocks. You're not going to find the next Apple by reading quarterly reports at midnight. You know who finds the next Apple? People who work at Apple's competitors and have inside information, which is also illegal. Everyone else is just guessing and pretending they have a system. Buy the index fund. Let the actual smart people at 500 companies figure out how to make money. Your job is to not interfere. You can add 20% international exposure with VXUS if you want. After you max the Roth IRA at $7,500, open a taxable brokerage account with Fidelity, Schwab, or Vanguard and keep investing in the same index funds. Set up automatic contributions of whatever you can afford monthly. And here's something critical about index funds. You're not just buying stocks, you're buying a system that's been proven to work for decades. When you buy VOO, you're betting on the American economy continuing to grow. Companies go bankrupt, industries collapse, but the overall market has always recovered and reached new highs. Let me show you what compounding does. If you invest $20,000 in an S&P 500 index fund at 10% annually, in 10 years, $51,875. In 20 years, $134,550. In 30 years, $348,988. You turn $20,000 into almost $350,000 by doing nothing for 3 decades. But if you invest that $20,000 and add $500 per month, after 30 years at 10%, you'll have over $1.5 million. You contribute $200,000 total. Your money earns $1.3 million in gains. Your money earned 6.5 times what you put in. Let me put that in perspective. At the 4% safe withdrawal rate, that $1.5 million means $60,000 per year you can pull out forever without touching the principal. That's a full salary. From doing nothing except making one smart decision today and then repeating it monthly for 3 decades. While your friends are stressing about whether they can retire, you're deciding whether to retire at 55 or 50. And here's the cost of waiting. Invest $20,000 today for 30 years at 10%. You get $348,988. Wait 5 years and invest that same $20,000. After 25 years, you'll have $216,694. That 5-year delay cost you $132,294. That's not just money. That's 4 years and 4 months of your working life. Like, imagine telling your 60-year-old self that they have to work 4 extra years because your 25-year-old self waited 5 years to start investing. That's what procrastination actually costs. Not money, time. Now, I know what just happened. I showed you those compound interest numbers, and your brain immediately started looking for ways to juice those returns even higher. Stop. This is where people destroy themselves. They see the S&P 500 near all-time highs and think surely it has to come down soon. So they'll wait for a crash. Here's why that's terrible. The market spends most of its time at or near all-time highs because it trends upward. If you only invested when the market wasn't at all-time highs, you'd be sitting on the sidelines most of the time. There's actually a famous study about this. Researchers looked at the worst possible market timer in history. Someone who invested $2,000 per year into the S&P 500, but only invested at the absolute worst times right before every major crash from 1970 to 2013. The worst market timer ever. And you know what happened? They still ended up with over $1.1 million because even though they bought at the worst possible times, they stayed invested and let time do the work. Meanwhile, the person sitting on the sidelines waiting for the perfect moment ended up with nothing. Time in the market beats timing the market every single time. Now let's talk about what not to do. Do not try to time the market. JP Morgan found that if you invested $10,000 and stayed fully invested from 1993 to 2013, you'd have $97,700. If you missed just the 10 best days over those 20 years, you'd have $49,000. The missing 10 days out of 5,000 trading days cut returns in half. Most of the best days happen right after the worst days when everyone is panicking. Like when you sit on the sidelines waiting for the perfect time, you miss the recovery. Do not day trade. Do not buy individual stocks unless you understand the business and plan to hold for years. 90% of day traders lose money. The average active trader underperforms the index by 6.5% per year. Do not invest in things you don't understand. If someone pitches whole life insurance as an investment, run. MLM opportunity, run faster. Stock tip, that random crypto coin your Uber driver told you about, ignore it. And here's the thing about day trading that nobody mentions. 90% of day traders lose money, which is honestly impressive when you think about it. The stock market goes up over time. Doing nothing would make you money. You have to actively try to lose money in a rising market, and yet 90% of day traders find a way. They're like people entering a building through the window while the door is wide open. Technically possible, much harder, and everyone watching thinks you're an idiot. And the biggest one, do not let lifestyle inflation destroy your savings. You hit $20,000 and suddenly think you deserve a nicer apartment or better car. Maybe you do. But if buying it drops you back to zero, you just spent years grinding to save money that you incinerated in weeks. Credit card debt hit $1.28 trillion. The personal savings rate collapsed from 33% to 3.5%, which means the average person is now saving about $250 per month. You know what that gets you? Nothing that matters. A used car in 12 months? Maybe. That's it. Meanwhile, $250 per month invested for 30 years at 10% becomes $566,000. So the average person is choosing between a used car in a year or over $500,000 in 3 decades. And they're choosing the car every single time. Don't be average. Here's what lifestyle inflation actually looks like in real time. You save $20,000. You feel successful. You've been driving a 2014 Corolla for 6 years, and honestly, it's fine, but you're tired of your coworkers making jokes about it, so you trade it in, get something respectable. Nothing crazy, just a 2023 model, $380 per month. That's $4,560 per year. Over 30 years, that $380 per month invested at 10% becomes $863,000. You traded a slightly nicer car for almost $1 million in retirement wealth. And the worst part, in 3 years, you'll be just as used to the 2023 model as you were to the 2014, and you'll start eyeing 2027 models, wondering if maybe you deserve another upgrade. I've seen this pattern destroy people over and over. They hit a savings goal, they celebrate by upgrading their lifestyle, and then they're right back where they started, except now they have higher fixed costs that are harder to cut. That nicer apartment costs $400 more per month. That's $4,800 a year you're now committed to spending. If you invested that $400 monthly instead at 10% returns, after 30 years, you'd have over $900,000. You traded a slightly nicer place to live for almost $1 million in retirement wealth. Was it worth it? You know what's wild? A bunch of people will save $20,000 over 3 years and then spend $4,000 on a vacation because I deserve it and you can't take it with you. Both of which are true, but neither of which explain why you just lit 20% of your net worth on fire to take pictures in front of buildings you don't care about so people you don't like can see them on Instagram. That's not treating yourself, that's paying $4,000 for temporary dopamine and permanent regret. Here's another option. Treasury bills. You can buy them at treasurydirect.gov or through your brokerage. They are backed by the US government, making them one of the safest investments on earth. Unlike a savings account, the rate is locked in for the term you choose, and in many places the interest is exempt from state and local taxes. It's the perfect place for cash you might need in the next, 1 to 2 years. You could also consider real estate. With $20,000, you've got enough for an FHA down payment. 3.5% down on a $200,000 property is $7,000, plus closing costs brings you to $15,000 to $20,000. If you house hack by buying a duplex, live in one unit and rent out the other, the tenant pays your mortgage while you build equity. It's more hands-on than index funds, but the leverage and rental income can be powerful. Strategy depends on age. In your 20s, be aggressive. You've got decades to recover from crashes. Go 90% stocks, 10% bonds. Max the Roth IRA every year. Keep your emergency fund lean. Maybe 3 months, since you probably don't have a mortgage or kids yet. Time is your weapon. Like a 25-year-old who invests $20,000 once will have roughly $350,000 by age 55, assuming 10% returns. If you're in your 20s, your biggest advantage isn't your income or your savings rate. It's that you can watch your portfolio drop 40% in a crash and shrug because you don't need that money for 40 years. Your 55-year-old coworker can't do that. They're checking their 401k every day during a downturn, panicking about whether they can still retire. You should be hoping for a crash so you can buy stocks on sale. That's the superpower of being young, and most people waste it by being too conservative. In your 30s, you've got more income, but more obligations. Bump emergency fund to 6 months. Still prioritize Roth IRA and index funds, but start thinking about 529 plans if you have kids. Allocation. 80% stocks, 20% bonds. In your 40s, urgency increases. You should have 5 times your income saved by 50. If you're behind, this $20,000 is critical. Max retirement accounts, consider catch-up contributions, shift toward 60-40 stocks and bonds. The reason these allocations change with age isn't because stocks become riskier as you get older, it's because your time horizon shortens. A 25-year-old can ride out a market crash and wait for the recovery. A 55-year-old who needs that money in 10 years can't afford to see their portfolio cut in half right before retirement. That's why you gradually shift toward more stable assets as you age. It's not about being conservative. It's about being realistic about how much time you have to recover from volatility. Sometimes the best investment is in yourself. If a certification could increase your income by $10,000 to $30,000 per year, a mark spending $500 to $2,000 on it might beat any stock market return. A Google Cloud certification costs roughly $200 and can open doors to six-figure jobs. A WS certification costs $300 and average salaries often exceed $130,000. These aren't expenses. They're investments with massive returns. Just make sure you're investing in skills with real market demand. So here's the framework. If you've got $20,000 saved, first, pay off any debts over 7%. That's a guaranteed return. Second, build an emergency fund of $10,000 to $15,000 in a high-yield savings account, earning 4% plus. Third, max your Roth IRA at $7,500 and buy a total market index fund like VTI or VOO. Fourth, put anything left into a taxable brokerage in the same funds or into I-bonds for safety. Then set up automatic monthly contributions and never stop. That's it. It's not sexy. It's not complicated. It doesn't involve researching stocks or following crypto Twitter. What works is buying boring index funds consistently, keeping costs low, avoiding stupid mistakes, and letting time do the work. Remember what I said at the beginning? There are only two paths from $20,000. One leads to $350,000. One leads back to zero with a nicer car. The difference isn't luck, it's not income, it's not timing, it's whether you can do something boring and effective instead of something exciting and destructive. Your $20,000 is a test. Can you be boring for 3 decades while everyone around you tries to be clever? Can you drive the paid-off Corolla while your coworker finances a BMW? Can you keep buying index funds when they're down 30% and everyone's saying the market is broken? Because that's what this actually takes. Not intelligence, not secret knowledge, just the ability to follow a simple plan without getting distracted by shiny objects or scared by temporary losses. The people who build wealth aren't smarter than you, they're just more boring. They do the same thing every month for 30 years while everyone else chases returns and picks stocks and tries to time markets and switches strategies every time something doesn't work immediately. Be boring. Get wealthy. Everything else is noise. Open the Roth IRA, buy the index fund, set up the automatic contributions, and then go live your life while compound interest does what it's been doing for a century. Quietly making patient, boring people wealthy while everyone else stays broke trying to be interesting.